Hey guys, Bicebump here, bringing you this 9.2 Frost Death Knight beginner rotation guide. Today I will be covering all the fundamental aspects of playing the Frost Death Knight, so that you can just go into 9.1 and start blasting straight away. This will include resource management, core rotation, procs, cooldowns, the opener, as well as the Mythic class gameplay. Let's just straight onto it and talk about the resources. The Frost Death Knight has two resources. They are called runes and runic power. The runes you can see below your character portrait. There are those 6 blue skulls there. They are spent on abilities such as Obliterate and Remorseless Winter. Spending a rune will make it go on cooldown, and it then takes 10 seconds to recharge fully. This 10-second duration is luckily hasted, which means that if you have more haste, it will take a short amount of time. For instance, at 25% haste, it will take 8 seconds to generate a rune. The runes are a bit special. They can't all recharge at the same time. A maximum of 3 can actually recharge at the same time. You can see that if you spend all of them and then look at them, you can see there's only 3 of them that are spinning and becoming ready again. To take full advantage of this recharge, that means that we essentially always want 3 runes recharging at any time. If we have only 2 recharging, we're losing out on recharge, which means that at the end of the day, we're going to have less runes to spend on our favorite abilities. The runes, when spent, generate 10 runic power, our secondary resource. You can see the runic power bar below your character name is that blue bar. It is spent on abilities such as Frost Strike, Glacial Advance, and Breath of Synagosa, and is kind of like a secondary resource. Generally, as the Frost Death Knight, we want to spend as much runes as possible, and we don't always care about our runic power going to waste. I'll talk about that a little bit later when it comes to the core rotation. We also have two procs we need to care about. They're called Rhyme and Killing Machine. Rhyme is a proc that triggers off our Obliterate ability. It makes it so that our Howling Blast ability becomes free of cost, usually costs 1 rune, and that it deals a ton more damage. We have Killing Machine. It triggers off our critical auto attacks. It makes it so that our next Obliterate deals Frost damage and is a guaranteed crit. Those Killing Machines, they hit really hard, so you want to make sure that you spend those as soon as possible. Same is true for Rhyme. As soon as you get a Rhyme proc, just spend that ASAP. Now, for the single target rotation, we essentially have 3 abilities that we will be pressing: Obliterate, Frost Strike, and Howling Blast. We use Obliterate to spend our runes, we use Frost Strike to spend the runic power that we generate, and we use Howling Blast on procs of Rhyme. That's the simple bit. Now, to maximize this, we want to manage our resources properly. This means, as our number 1 priority, to always have 3 runes recharging. The runes is the resource that is converted into by far the most damage. So we want to make sure we generate as much of that as possible, which means that you don't want to overcap on runes, that we say, which means they're having less than 3 of them recharging. Secondary priority is making sure that we don't cap runic power, which means that if we're close to the cap of 100, we make sure to spend that runic power with Frost Strike. It's also quite nice because spending runic power actually also generates runes indirectly. We have the runic empowerment passive, which means that every time we spend some runic power, we have a chance to generate a rune. I haven't mentioned this before, but the Frost Death Knight also has a dot called Frost Fever. Passively generates some runic power force, deals quite a lot of damage. We generally don't need to care about this. We will passively apply it through the Howling Blast that we spend our Rhyme procs on. Cool, that's the core rotation. It is really quite simple. It's just those 3 abilities: Obliterate, Frost Strike, and Howling Blast, and then just using them all together. Frost is generally considered quite a proc-based spec because you only have those 3, and then whenever you get procs, you kind of react to those. So you get a Rhyme, you press Howling Blast. If you get a Killing Machine, try and press Obliterate, and so on. Let's move on to the cooldowns, which is what creates the complexity with Frost. We have Remorseless Winter. This is a 1 rune cost ability, which deals damage around you for a couple of seconds. This is heavily boosted with conduits and talents and legendaries as well sometimes, which means that it deals a ton of damage. We want to press this on cooldown all the time. This is like one of the main points you need to track as Frost Death Knight. Just make sure you press Howling Blast whenever it make sure you press Remorseless Winter whenever it comes up. We also have Pillar of Frost. This is our main kind of buff cooldown, has a 1 minute CD. It gives us a good chunk of strength, and that strength is then increased with every rune we spend in its window. We always press this on cooldown, right? It's simple as that. Always press it when it comes up. We do need to pay attention if we are running the Obliteration talent. It's one of the 2 primary builds. With Obliteration, during your Pillar Frost window, hitting Frost Strike or Howling Blast will generate a proc of Killing Machine. This introduces what we call weaving in the Pillar Frost window, where essentially we spend every second GCD generating a Killing Machine proc, and then every second GCD spending it. The whole idea here is to only ever press either Frost Strike, Howling Blast, or Obliterate in your window. You don't want to press anything else. So make sure before you go into your Pillar Frost window that you use your other cooldown stuff beforehand. You don't want to end up being like, oh, I'm halfway in my Pillar Frost window. Oh, I need to press my other cooldowns. That's not a good idea, right? Spend those beforehand. We enter the Pillar Frost window by hitting Pillar Frost and then instantly either Howling Blast if we have a Rime proc, or Frost Strike if we don't have a Rime proc. We then follow up with Obliterate and then go back to Frost Strike or Howling Blast, and then we hit whatever suits our situation best. Generally, if you have a Rime proc, always hit Howling Blast. That's kind of like the priority. And then we go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. If you get a natural Killing Machine proc here, when you would otherwise generate one, spend it first, right? So if you spend a Killing Machine proc with Obliterate, and then your next GCD, you're ready to generate one, maybe you can get lucky and get another Killing Machine, then you need to hit Obliterate again. Cool. We also have Breath of Zaragoza. This is like the other viable build. This is a spell that, when activated, depletes your runic power every second, and it deals a ton of damage in like a cone in front of you. The whole idea for this talent is to bank some runic power before you press it, and after you press it, only ever generate runic power, never spend it. Like if you hit Breath of Zaragoza and then accidentally hit like Frost Strike or Glacial Advance or Death Strike, that's going to spend a lot of runic power, which is going to significantly shorten your Breath of Zaragoza, and that's something you don't want to do. Once you hit your Breath of Zaragoza, you only really want to press either Obliterate, Remorseless Winter, or Howling Blast with Rime procs. Now, how you play it in your CD window depends on how many resources you currently have. So once you go into your Breath of Zaragoza window, you're probably going to have lots of runic power, and you're going to have lots of runes. So what you will be doing is just pressing Obliterate to generate runic power, you press Howling Blast to spend your Rime procs, and that's going to be fine and all. Now, after a while, you're going to start seeing yourself being a bit more starved. So maybe you're going to have 2 runes ready, your runic power is below 50, right? Every GCD matters. At that point, stop spending your Rimes on your Howling Blast, right? So you cannot afford that GCD if you could otherwise press something that generated runic power, like Remorseless Winter or Obliterate. Other than that, make sure you manage your resources properly. Don't overcap on runic power if you enter the window with a ton of it. Don't have lots of runes ready when you could otherwise spend them. And just following those rules, you should be able to have very long breath windows, especially with the 4Ps. Then you can expect up to 50 seconds during Bloodlust and everything. You get so much resources. Now, we also have Empower Rune Weapon. This is a 1 minute, like 30-second cooldown. I don't know. It gives you some runes, some runic power, and some haste for 20 seconds. Now, even though the cooldown is like 1.2 or 3 minutes, always use it with your Pillar Frost windows. Like the haste is significant enough to make it worthwhile to hold. For obliteration, we actually want to use Empower Rune Weapon like up to 8 seconds before we hit Pillar of Frost. This ensures that we get like a nice amount of resources before our Pillar of Frost window, which means that we never will starve in our weaving rotation. For Breath of Zaragoza, we actually want to hold Empower Rune Weapon until like 10-15 seconds after we press Breath of Zaragoza. This depends heavily on how many resources you have. Like, you want to press Empower Rune Weapon as soon as you feel like you're starting to starve a little bit. If you press it too early, you're just going to overcap on resources and it's going to be wasted. So hold on to it for essentially as long as possible without you dropping the breath when it's active. So you want to make sure your breath is up for the entire duration. But as I said, with 4Ps, that's going to be like 10-15 seconds. We also have Cold Heart, which is a talent. This is generally only used with Breath of Zaragoza build. We're going to play this, we can do it in 2 ways actually. Either you use it at 20 stacks at the end of your pillar window and then 10 stacks in between your pillars. If you do it that way, it means that it perfectly lines up so that every second use is at the end of the pillar. You can also opt to just use it at 16 plus stacks and just be done with it. I think that's kind of the easiest way. So whenever it's a 16 plus, look to see if you get a Fallen Crusader proc from your weapon. If you get it, use it. Otherwise, you spend it when it's like at 20. We also have the Frost Scream's Fury ability. This is like this awesome dragon you summon that moves forward in 40 yards, deals a ton of AoE damage. The usage of this depends heavily on the situation. So in AoE, always use it at the end of Pillar of Frost window. You want it to be buffed as heavily as possible, and it's going to deal a ton of damage. Also try and time it whenever there are adds, because any add you add up is going to linearly scale the damage. So it's very worthwhile to just save it for whenever there are adds, even though you can't exactly time your pillar window. Even if that's ideal, just use it on the adds. For single target, when we're running Breath of Zaragoza, use it under Pillar Frost. When we're running Obliteration, use it outside of the pillar. I previously said this, with Obliteration, the pillar window is kind of sacred. We don't want to press anything but Frost Strike, Howling Blast, Obliterate. So talents and cooldowns like Frostman's Fury, they get sent outside the Pillar Frost window. We also have Raise Dead. This is kind of like, I don't get why this is a cooldown really. Just summon a little dude fight for you for 1 minute. Just bind it to some ability, whatever. Don't matter really. You can also use Sacrificial Pact to explode it at the end, but it doesn't matter. So just ignore it and bind it somewhere, really. Right, for the Covenant abilities, they all very nicely line up with our Pillar Frost window, so use them on cooldown and make sure they, align with your Pillar Frost window. As I previously said, when you're running Obliteration, do not press your Covenant ability in your Obliteration window. Use it beforehand or straight afterwards. Ideally beforehand, right, because then you can buff it with your Pillar Frost window. Right, now let's look at some openers, just to get some vibe of how this actually looks like in practice. So start off Obliteration. We are going to initiate with pressing Remorseless Winter. Talked about this previously. Press this all the time as much as possible. We then follow up with our Covenant ability, and if we're very lucky and get a Killing Machine proc, we spend that Killing Machine proc before we hit our Pillar Frost window. This is actually general advice. So playing Obliteration, right? The Pillar Frost window is coming up. If you get a Killing Machine proc before the Pillar Frost window, spend the Killing Machine proc before you enter the window. Otherwise, that's going to be like a wasted opportunity to generate the Killing Machine proc. Once you've hit your Covenant ability, move ahead with Empower Rune Weapon, use your Raise Dead, hit Pillar Frost, and then instantly hit either Frost Strike or Howling Blast. Generally, it's going to be Howling Blast because you're not lucky enough to get a Killing Machine proc in opener. Happens rarely, so you're just going to use a naked Howling Blast to initialize that first Killing Machine, and then move into that weaving rotation. Hitting Obliterate, and then Frost Strike, Howling Blast, and then Obliterate, and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You get it. Right, for Breath of Zaragoza, we do something similar. We start off with Remorseless Winter here again, follow up with double Obliterate to generate some rune power to bank some rune power for our Breath of Zaragoza window. Once those two are done, we hit Rhyme if we get that from those. And then we hit our Covenant ability, Pillar Frost, Raise Dead, and start hitting Obliterate to get Breath of Zaragoza going. And as I said, you then use Empower Rune Weapon a couple seconds down the line to keep your breath going. Cool. Now, for Mythic Plus, Luckily for us, the rotation really doesn't change. Like with the meta talents we use, there is actually 0 difference between playing Mythic Plus and playing single target, right? It's a bit weird, I know, but it is what it is. The command ability usage does change a little bit. Like the Venter ability Swarming Mist generates a ton of runic power, and we really just want to use that at the later end of our Breath of Synagosa window. This is also true for single target, but in AoE, that's gonna like max you out on runic power. So you just hold on to it until you're very low, you press that, and you go full runic power again, and you can keep going. For Death's Due, the only thing that changes is with the obliteration rotation. I said that the window was sacred, but in AoE with Death's Due, those killing machine cleaves it generates are so worthwhile, which means that as we enter our Pillar of Frost window, we're going to hit Howling Blast Frost Strike, and then the second GCD is going to be Death's Due. That's going to allow us to optimize the number of obliterate cleaves we get in our Pillar of Frost window. Alright, cool. I hope you guys found that useful. I hope you are excited to play Frost DK 9.2. I am, and definitely going to give it a proper go. Do leave a comment down below. Tell me what you thought about this video. Other download. Do consider subscribing. You can always hit me up in the actual Discord if you have any questions. And I thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for more content. Thank you.